Every Sunday night, I did my grocery shopping at Carter's Market. It was a quiet, old-fashioned store that didn't see much traffic, especially late at night. I liked going there because I could shop without being bothered. No crowded aisles, no long checkout lines, just me and my list. That particular night was cold and rainy, the kind of weather that keeps most people at home. I pulled into the nearly empty parking lot, grabbed a cart, and headed inside. The store was as quiet as ever, the soft hum of the overhead lights the only sound. I worked my way through the aisles, ticking items off my list. Bread, eggs, milk, some frozen dinners. It was routine, almost mindless. But when I reached aisle 7, the cleaning supplies aisle, I noticed something strange. There was a woman standing at the far end of the aisle. She was tall and thin, with long dark hair that hung limply over her face. She wore a faded gray coat that looked soaked as if she'd just come in from the rain. Her back was to me, and she stood completely still, staring at the shelves. "Excuse me," I said politely, pushing my cart into the aisle. She didn't move or respond. I assumed she hadn't heard me, so I edged my cart around her. As I passed, I glanced at her face. Her skin was pale, almost gray, and her eyes were wide and unblinking. She looked off. "Everything okay?" I asked, my voice hesitant. She turned her head slowly, almost mechanically, to look at me. Her eyes locked onto mine, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Then, without warning, she turned back to the shelf and walked away, disappearing around the corner. I shook it off, telling myself she was probably just an odd customer. Every store has them, right? But as I moved on to the next aisle, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling she'd left behind. Something about her didn't feel right. By the time I finished my shopping, I'd convinced myself I was overreacting. I headed to the checkout where the cashier, a middle-aged man named Tom, was leaning against the counter, scrolling through his phone. "Quiet night?" I asked as I loaded my items onto the belt. Tom nodded without looking up. "Always is on Sundays." I hesitated, then asked, "Did you see a woman come through here? Tall, dark hair, kind of strange?" He frowned and finally looked up. "Nope, haven't seen anyone all night. You're the only one here." I froze. "No one?" "I just saw her in aisle 7. Tom shrugged. "Could have come in while I was in the back, I guess, but I didn't see her at the register." I paid for my groceries and left, trying to shake the growing unease. As I pushed my cart through the parking lot, I couldn't help glancing back at the store. The lights in aisle 7 flickered faintly, casting eerie shadows across the windows. I loaded my groceries into the car and drove home, telling myself it was nothing, just a strange encounter with a weird customer. But later that night, as I unpacked my bags, I found something I hadn't bought. At the bottom of one bag was a small bottle of bleach. It wasn't on my list, and I was certain I hadn't picked it up. Attached to it was a piece of paper, folded neatly. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. In shaky, childlike handwriting, the note read, "She watches you." I stared at the note, my heart racing. Was this some kind of prank? Had someone slipped it into my bag while I wasn't looking? Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about the woman in aisle 7. I decided to do some digging, asking around about Carter's Market. Most people just shrugged, saying it was an old store with nothing remarkable about it. But then I spoke to an elderly neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, who'd lived in the area her whole life. When I mentioned Carter's Market, her expression darkened. "That place has a history," she said, lowering her voice. "Years ago, a woman went missing there. She was last seen shopping late at night, just like you." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What happened to her?" "They never found her body," Mrs. Henderson said, "but they found her cart in aisle 7. Blood on the floor, too. The store closed for a while after that, but they reopened a few months later, pretending nothing happened." I thanked her and left, my mind racing. I couldn't stop thinking about the woman's pale face, the way she'd moved so unnaturally. That Sunday, against my better judgment, I went back to Carter's Market. I needed answers. The store was just as quiet as before, and Tom was at the register again, looking bored. I made my way to aisle 7, my heart pounding. The shelves were lined with cleaning supplies, just as before, but there was no sign of the woman. I was about to leave when I noticed something odd. At the far end of the aisle near the floor, one of the tiles was cracked. A dark stain seeped through the crack, almost black against the white tile. I knelt down for a closer look. The stain smelled faintly metallic, like blood. Suddenly, the lights in the aisle flickered violently, plunging me into brief moments of darkness. In one of those flickers, I saw her. She was standing at the other end of the aisle, her hair hanging over her face, her hands clutching the sides of her coat. Her head tilted unnaturally to the side as she took a step toward me. I scrambled to my feet and backed away, but the lights flickered again, and she was closer, her pale face twisted into a horrific grin. I ran. I didn't stop until I was in my car, speeding away from the store as fast as I could. I haven't been back to Carter's Market since, but sometimes, late at night, I think I see her. In my rearview mirror on the side of the road, or even in my own house, just a glimpse of that pale face and dark hair. And every time, I wonder if she's still watching me.